All right. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Mandy.
I'm glad to be here.
Uh, I've been looking forward to this conversation to learn more about how journaling can help with mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And been also wanting to talk to you about art
Yes.
and creativity.
Yes.
Before we dive into those topics, could you share with listeners a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I can. It's kind of a winding road. I am spent most of my life, as you can probably hear in my accent, in Southeast Georgia. And in that time, I have been in multiple creative arenas in terms of visual arts, music, worship leading in church settings, in ministry settings. Most of my life has been in a ministry environment up until probably 10 years ago, in my early 30s. And in that time, I transitioned to focusing more on art. That was also when I fell deep into journaling and worked out a lot of my mental health worries through journaling and through art, and then became a mom, started our family. So like I said, winding, but there have been some definite threads throughout. Mental health has been a big thread throughout. Creativity as a tool, as a resource for my emotional expression has been huge, and really just having a heart to serve people, to help make the world better, my world better, our world, our immediate community, make it better and contribute something. And in this time, a lot of that is going into my family and my daughters. And secondarily, it's going into teaching journaling in various angles. But one angle that I'm very interested in right now is journaling as a spiritual practice, as a soul care practice. So, which I'm sure we'll get into that. Yeah. Oh, and I'm a pastor's wife. So yes. That brings its own color to the story.
So you guys are very busy. Your weeks, I'm sure, have been full. Yes. And I'm gonna ask a little bit about how the last couple of years have been, but I want to go back to the your background as a worship leader and musician, and then how did you kind of make the transition from focusing on music or that role to more being more focused with your visual arts?
That was actually a bit of a natural transition. It was a transition that I saw coming, and it happened in the professional transition happened at the same time that I became a mom. One of the things that we wanted to do was provide hands-on parenting for our daughters. They came to us through foster care. So when we added them to our family, we added them in a way that we really wanted to make sure they were home, they were with a caregiver, and they had that stability and they had that smallness for a little while. And that in that transition, that was when I was also able to, in my free time, which, there's not much of that, but in my free time, spend it in my journal, spend it painting, getting acrylic on my fingers and on my clothes, and really just using that as a cathartic and emotional release for me to help me jump back into whatever parenting required of me. So the transition was natural in timing with our family.
The way you described that getting into your paints and your art, it sounds like that was a huge part of like self-care.
Absolutely.
At that time.
Yeah. And if anybody's familiar with art, it does play a role in dopamine and serotonin increase. It's in a similar way that athletes experience a bit of a high. It's not the endorphins, but it does elevate your overall mood and your sense of well-being. It has real chemical effects in your brain. So self-care for sure.
And so are you self-trained as an artist, or did you go to school for?
Yes, I am, I would say, in the category of self-taught artists, visual artists, although I would say in my entire professional career, I've done creative work. So the creative process is something that you can apply to music, you can apply to program planning, you can apply it to building a worship service, and you can apply it to creating journaling courses, or, obviously doing visual art. So I would just say I'm a professional creative who's worn many hats in the past 20-25 years.
Oh, I love that. So one key thing that I've been trying to grow in probably the last 10 years is in the area of creativity. So
Mm-hmm.
For someone maybe who's wanting to explore the area of creativity, what are some tips or pointers that you have, Mandy, for becoming more creative?
I would say, more than anything, follow your curiosity, follow your aesthetic in terms of, do you like movement? Would it be dance? Do you like sound? Would it be music? Do you like visual? And in that sense, would it be art? Would it be two-dimensional? Would it be three-dimensional? What is your aesthetic, and what are you drawn to? Or what do you feel like you could put your hand to and you can make it happen? And so from there, trusting that you do have a creative element to yourself, to your state of being. Primarily, one, because we were made in the image of God, and God, as a creator, he's crazy. I mean, some of these animals that we have, I mean, we live in Southeast Georgia, and the sand gnats are like, what were you thinking? So we've got some margin to get nuts with whatever it is that we're trying to do. And we've been made to be creative. So why not? Even a bad idea is okay in the universe. So go for it. And then also to realize, really, Savon, I like to distill creativity to problem solving, because we understand problem solving, right? And if we understand creativity simply as an expressive form of problem solving, an aesthetic form of problem solving, then that's something that can be accessible to everybody. So when I approach a canvas, I am solving the problem of wanting to create something beautiful. And I'm an abstract painter, so I like the chaos, and I like to play with the chaos until it turns into something that is controlled, that is calm, that is balanced. And so when I approach the canvas, I'm solving that problem. I'm solving micro problems of what colors to use, where do I apply them, what line work to use. And so if you think of creativity as problem solving, it's not so intimidating.
Okay. Yeah. When I see your art, you share it often on social media. I don't understand what's going on sometimes, but it always creates like a mood or an emotional reaction when I
Absolutely.
see the things that you share. And so it helps me to understand that you've that problem solving mindset. And for me, kind of transitioning from science, like I studied biology and have always I've taken and been in the medical field for almost 30 years now, trying to shift that to the more creativity. The bridge that helps, that approaching it as a problem, having a problem solving mindset, that I think that'll help. I'll have to chew on that, because I'm always trying to creatively work with couples or individuals in the counseling realm.
Yes.
And there's always often people come with certain problems that they
that's why they're there.
Yeah. And trying to creatively find ways to get into their hearts and integrate, make sense of like what's going on in their world or their current circumstances,
Yeah.
and what's going on in their soul and their spirit, in their hearts, make
Mhm.
sense of the story that they're going through.
Right.
Yeah. And for me, like art, it's beautiful, but it's not just like sunny and bright. Maybe it's because I
Mhm.
live here in Portland and it's always gray and cloudy and raining. But for me, beauty is in like like kind of the messy and the dark stuff.
Right.
I spend so much time with folks that are struggling with depression,
Mhm.
or pain,
Mhm.
um, and e- even in like hard things and even in suffering, there's beauty,
Yes.
and creativity and art help remind us uh of that. Or for me, it's just hopeful,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the charge of artists and musicians and dancers is to portray the human experience and really the human struggle, but turn it into something beautiful. It's a redemptive process. I feel like we really are called to a type of a creative redemption, not as saviors, but as representatives, as mirrors, as witnesses. And so, I think it's interesting that so many creative types are also the melancholy types. We like to get in our feels and just roll around, and we're not afraid of the hard conversations or the hard topics or the hard emotions. And as much as that can feel like a curse, I think ultimately it's a blessing because we're able to take a hard look at it and then digest it and turn it into something beautiful.
Mm, yeah. For you, Mandy, how has that been received, um in your like your friendships or at church, like the
Well,
just your willingness to do that?
I I think it's okay. I really think it's okay.
Hmm.
I think people are refreshed by having spiritual leaders who are willing to say this is rough, or who are willing to talk about their own journey with mental health. And you need a spiritual leader who's going to say the brain is an organ, and it's not just about praying more. It's about taking care of your body. It's about listening to what's manifesting in your body. It's about um, getting the medical and the therapeutic help that you need. And there's nothing necessarily spiritually wrong with you. It's just something that's going on. um I think people can see through the lies and can see through the toxic positivity that sometimes comes in faith circles. And I think they're refreshed by hearing someone say, okay, this is gross, this is hard, this is tricky, this is complicated, this is
Mm,
natural, this is medical, and telling the truth about the human experience. So
mm,
I have not really experienced a great deal of pushback or criticism for telling the truth about life.
mm. Yeah, that's great. I was I've been reading a book about Enneagram types, Ian Cron's latest one. And
Yes.
Mandy, for the last 10 years, I've been telling myself I'm a 7, and I'm realizing I'm a 4. I
Hello, brother. Hello.
I realized that, and that's new to me. I mean, like in the last 2 weeks.
What is it that tipped you to go, oh gosh, maybe I'm a 4?
So I I I've been like reading mostly and focusing on like the 7, because like, oh, that must, that's me. Um, but when I read the 4 chapter this time,
Mm.
and I've read a couple books on Enneagram, it's not like this is the first time, but for some reason, it just really hit me that no, that's me. And that's actually how I've felt since I was like 5, 6, 7 years old,
Mm.
you know. And actually, one thing that reminded me is we visited our some new friends at church who are
Okay.
missionaries to Cambodia, and talking with them helped me remember when I was a kid,
Mm.
and then it helped me remember like junior high, high school, college.
Mm.
It's like, wait, like at my core, that's more the feelings and the thoughts.
Mhm.
And so when I read that chapter, I was like, okay, that's why the kind of the core motivator for
Right.
7, it never really resonated with me
Mhm.
about how I'm like sevens are like trying to like stay positive and avoid feelings and like
That's
dark
the total
emotions.
opposite.
And
That's
I'm
my
like, wait, like behaviorally, like I'm, as an extrovert, I
right.
might look like a 7, but my heart inside is totally like a 4.
Okay.
um and so this is kind of new to me, and so
Mhm.
now you could like it's obvious to you, but it's like, well, that's why I'm interested in creativity and I want to write.
And helping people, and you're not afraid of hard conversations,
Yeah,
and you don't shy away from the difficult stuff of life. Absolutely. That's total four
right,
all the way.
right. So I was like, and then when I became a counselor, or before that, when I went to grad school to become a counselor, and then we are talking about being authentic and you know going to group counseling with my classmates, and we're talking about our stuff. It's like, I have found my people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well,
this is
this
what
is
I should be doing with my
I
life.
love it. And this is classic second half of life. This you sound like you're in the turn in a lot of ways, and it's coming all
Yeah.
the way down to like the core of who you are. Like all the get it, God's calling out the absolute truest nature of you, and express that to the world, give that to the world.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
And I'm turning 52 this year. It's got one of those things where, boy, it would have been nice to recognize this 10 or 15 years ago, but
Yes.
um I'm I'm um I'm I'm grateful for the journey, and
Mhm.
hopeful for whatever time I have left
Yeah.
to yeah to uh, here's one thing I've been meditating on this week, Mandy, is uh that when people talk about camping or backpacking,
Mhm.
and or visiting somewhere, and they say like leave leave the place better than
Mhm.
um um this world is not home.
Mm.
I've been reflecting on that, especially with
Mm.
what's going on in Ukraine.
Right.
um and I want to make this world a better place than um you know be, be, when I leave. That I
Yeah.
want it to be better
Yeah.
than when I came. And I think we do that through relationships, but we also do that through art.
Mhm.
We do that with what we create and share with the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm. Mhm.
um and the so how did you, Mandy, start sharing your art? Because a lot of people journal, a lot of people kind of like write
Right.
music, or but how do you take the step of like saying like, I am an artist, and
Right.
I'm gonna put it out there?
Well, Savon, that's a complicated question, because as a 4, we can be very others oriented, and as an
Mm,
empath, I'm very in tune with everybody around me and what's happening, and I have a drive to, like you said, leave the world better. And so I want to make a difference. I want to do something that matters, not just in terms of my life, but in terms of my community. And as a musician and as a worship leader in a church environment, my creativity was geared to serve others, and not in a bad way, but it was performative in a sense. And I don't know a better word for it, but it was service, and it was in front of people, and it was public. Maybe I should say it, instead of performative, I should say public. And so my creativity, I was already kind of used to that, that getting up in front of people aspect, which is so uncomfortable. It's very hard. I'm not an extrovert, and I really don't like eyes on myself, but
oh, wow.
I did it because it was something that I could do, something that I was fairly good at, and something that was needed. I was serving. And then in my early 30s, when I transitioned out of, I tell people I'm a retired worship leader. So when I retired in my early 30s and transitioned into visual art, it actually started accidentally. I truly was journaling for my mental health, and I was doing a lot of art journaling because that really taps into the subconscious and the emotional aspects. And we can talk about the difference between like art, visual journaling, and verbal journaling, visual and verbal.
Yeah. Can you share that difference right now?
Oh, right now. Okay. Yeah. Difference right now. So when you are doing visual journaling, art journaling, where you're using like painting or collage, watercolor, drawing, sketching, stuff like that, it plays more with the subconscious, below the surface aspect of what's going on in us. And it can have a very efficient, cathartic effect on us. We can very quickly get things out that may not feel as big of a release if we were to just write it out, like type of a report about something, versus letting the experience go, releasing the experience. So visual kind of pulls things out in a deep way, and in an emotive way, and in like a core existential sort of way, whereas verbal is more about the reporting and the recounting, or the processing, like the conscious, like higher level processing. So words are really good when we're trying to move to a solution, like take all the messy pieces and put it there. So we're trying to think about something, like we're trying to do you do a video on this podcast? I'm doing my fingers kind of like a mouse is playing with a little tiny kernel. Yeah. So, like you're just going to kind of mess with something and see if you can figure it out. That's a different kind of journaling, and verbal can be really good for that. Verbal can be really good for recording experiences, recording what we feel like is happening in our prayer life and our meditation life, and what we're reading, what we're learning. It's much more of the higher level processing, whereas the visual is just the gut of it. Just get it on paper. And I need both of those.
Yes. Yeah.
I benefit from both of those.
Yeah. As you describe that, it sounds like the verbal or written is kind of like organizing it and kind of synthesizing it and kind of making meaning, and the visual is more, I love that, the gut of it is more the like the emotion, the experience of it. Do you recommend folks like start with the visual, or is there like an order? That
honestly, I think it depends on the person. But Savon, if they haven't picked up a tool since a crayon, if they haven't touched any visual, creative, expressive materials since they were kids, I mean, you might have to start with a pencil. But you might have to say, well, why don't you draw a little bit of it instead of just writing it all down? Like, it can be really, really intimidating for people who have already decided that they're not visual, they're not artists, they're whatever, however we want to, whatever language we want to use.
Yeah, I told myself that forever.
Yeah, exactly. So collage can be a really safe introduction. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had a wise mentor say, Mandy, how about you get yourself a book or a journal or a little something, and just pick some images out of magazines or print them off the internet. Pick some images that really feel like they mean something to you, like they resonate, like they match up with something happening inside of you. Don't ask why, don't dig, don't get too deep in it. Just do it. Just if it really hits, just get it and glue it down. And that's honestly how I started. And it didn't take long before I was pulling out acrylics. I was writing down some things. A lot of my journal art is a combination of visual and verbal, because I do like to include some words to kind of clarify what's going on the page. But and you know what, that was when the jump happened to being a professional, part-time professional artist in terms of like selling stuff. Sometimes I would put one of my art journal pages online on social media, and somebody would say, can I buy that? And I'm like, it's just a page in my journal. But then it was, well, I'll paint one that looks kind of like it on a canvas, and yeah, you can buy that. And they were like all about it. So it's sort of like the paint sort of just ran off the page onto the canvas, and then we were off to the races from there.
Wow.
Yeah.
The for early on, Mandy, what were some of the things you were working through emotionally, mentally, if that's okay for you?
Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can remember. I had a lot of anxiety, and I needed a healthy way to process my anxiety, really calm the storm in my brain. So using visual art helped me get the emotion out, like release the emotional aspect of it. And then journaling, like, note taking in my journal, it helped me kind of put my thoughts in order. So I had to deal with the emotional chaos, for lack of a better way of saying it. And then I also had to deal with the thought overwhelm, the when your brain's buzzing with overthinking. So journaling really helped me organize my inner life, or put order. Let me say it better. Journaling helped me put order to my inner life. And from there, that was the start of it. And I had some really big pain. I want to say I may have been processing a miscarriage at the time. I can't remember entirely, but that may have been a part of it. Just a lot of spiritual confusion and a lot of soul wounding, and then the mental health aspect of trying to really help myself. The medication was involved also, but journaling, you have to do the work.
Yeah.
Not just let medication be a crutch, but you have to do the work.
Yeah. Those types of things where you're wrestling with faith, or where God is in what you're going through. How much of the journaling is like directed like towards God, or has elements of your faith in it?
I mean, the easy but gut level honest answer is all of it. Especially at this time. I don't live with a philosophy that there is a separation of the sacred and the profane. I think we have access to God at all times and from all angles. And so, if I believe that God is at work in my life, and that the Holy Spirit is at work inside of me, if there's an external working and an internal working, and it's all happening at the same time, then, if all I have to do is pay attention and cooperate. So in that sense, every page is a prayer. It's an act of listening. I will say it like that. If we think of prayer as talking, I would not qualify all my journal pages that way. But if we want to understand prayer as listening and receiving, then every page in its own way is coming from a posture of prayer in my heart. And it's not like I turn the page and think deeply spiritual thoughts and like hum and meditate, and then the angels start singing, and then the thing happens on the page. It's not it at all. I mean, it's really just real life. It's really just real life. But I want to orient my awareness in a way that I'm constantly asking myself the questions: what's happening in my life? How am I growing? Where is redemption? Where am I being challenged? What questions am I carrying? What answers have come my way? And in the world as it stands, if we don't consciously choose to pay attention to those things, we are going to miss it. So that's what my journal is. It is an act of devotion.
Wow. We're going to miss it unless we pay attention.
Yeah.
I love that. Journaling or even prayer as paying attention to the reality of what's going on.
Yeah.
Around us, but then inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think I described like watching or seeing the art that you share. I think that's what that helps me, because I'll be scrolling through social media, and sometimes like reading the comments and getting worked up, and then when I come across your art, it makes me pause. It makes me slow down. And especially if it evokes emotion, or sometimes you do art for specific situations, or sometimes I notice that you'll have like a word or two sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I like meditate on that word or pray. So you make me pause to pray with your art. But I'm going to add some of those questions. I'm going to have to like write them down, because you shared some great questions there. But paying attention, and listening. So what I'm curious, Mandy, how has your art evolved, or your journaling evolved at all in the last couple of years with the pandemic and the shutdown?
I would say my art has devolved in the past couple of years. I want to go back to that phrase of creativity being problem solving. And in my life, and in the life of many, what's the word I'm looking at? When people are highly creative, like when we're really like doing the thing, prolific in the world of many prolific creatives, we are moving at a snail's pace, because all of our problem solving in the past 2 years have been devoted to, wait, what now? Wait, we're supposed to do who now? Okay, they're all coming home from school. Like, really? They're all coming home from school now? Like tomorrow? We can't go to church.
Right.
I mean, I'm making light of it, but honestly, Sylvan, it's been 2 years of adapting and adjusting and that takes a lot of problem solving juice in our brains. And creative people, I don't think we have a higher degree of problem solving juice. I think we just apply it to the aesthetic. So we're dragging just like the rest of you. We're all dragging. And so to say my art has devolved, it's the rhythm, the pace of painting, the pace of art making that I had pre-pandemic, it's not there at all. And I try to get back into it, and then something happens and I'm knocked back down. And so really my journal has been the thing that has kept me in the steady state of micro creativity, where I just am doing something in my little moleskin. I'm making a little collage, or I'm making, a sketch of the azaleas that are blooming in my front yard, or, doing some kind of found poetry or something. And that has been because I need to honor the artist inside of me, and I need to still tap into the mental health aspect of creativity, of making a visual, painting and drawing. And I need that resource for myself and for my sanity. So I haven't dropped my practice completely, but in terms of producing like material that would sell, nah.
Yes. So I am so glad you shared that, Mandy, because I'm guessing there's some musicians and um, artists and writers listening to this, was that they're like looking at their friends who are cranking out like art every day, learning new languages, writing a bunch of songs, and they're like, I, I'm struggling to get through the day.
Yeah.
And I'm writing less, I'm creating less, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And I got nothing. And
Mm-mm.
so, yeah, that's so true.
Mm-hmm.
It, I've been, beating myself up about, not taking the next steps on the book I wrote 5 years ago. Facebook keeps reminding me. And it's like, no, the last 2 years, the priority has been like taking care of my family,
Exactly.
and taking care of my patients,
Yeah.
my clients. And everything got harder. So like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh One of my fellow coaches, she said, she was talking to someone about higher acuity with our
Ooh.
patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
With what everybody's dealing with, what we're listening to. And she's like, and we're suffering too.
Absolutely.
We're going through this too, with our families, with our lives
Mm-hmm.
too. I was like, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's I'm kind of a fan of creative, of people and
Mm-hmm.
artists. And this is something I tell myself, that like, I'm not talented. I'm just like a fan of talented people. And so whether it's music's the main one, but during the last 2 years, it was like cooking shows, like chefs. I became a fan of like Top Chef and shows like that, and just like the creativity of of uh, of chefs.
Culinary arts. That's why they
Culinary
call it
arts,
culinary
there we go.
arts. That's
Yes.
exactly why.
Yeah. And people just amaze me, like the
Mm.
talent. And like you described, being a musician and
Mm.
a visual artist. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, how are people good at more than one thing?
Because it all comes from the same place. And once you've tapped into
Mm.
that source and I mean the creative language, the expressive language, once you have grown comfortable with that, it's just about the medium. It's just about developing the skill, because we already have the language and we already have the content. It's just how we got to just say it. We got to make the thing. We got to produce it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Create. Don't say produce, say create. We have to create it.
Okay. The um with creativity or visual arts, is this something that you're passing on to your family or friends?
One of my daughters is very interested in this kind of stuff. So, she's at the age, they're twins. We have 12-year-old twins at this time where we're recording. And she is definitely in the creative brain and random ideas. And she has new ideas all the time. And so yes, but I have to be careful not to overlord, not to become teacher mom. And I'm more like, see what I did today, or come hang out with me in the studio while I paint, or do you want to use some of these supplies, or make sure she's got other creative adults in her life. We can't, when they're 12, you can't get too deep in it with them. They don't want you there.
Yeah. So you're just like making it available to her.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And trying to, when the time is right, try to instill some creative wisdom, but in ways that don't sound like I'm telling her what to do. You gotta be real sneaky. Parents have to be so sneaky.
It's true. It's true. The one thing I have to remind myself and get over myself. Well, you know, our youngest, you know, our two oldest are out of the house now. So I've learned a few things. And one of those is, however they receive the truth or the wisdom that they need, like, it doesn't have to be me that delivers it. Right. Like, I just got to get over myself. Like, oh, it'd be nice. Oh, like, you know, but just so long as I get it.
Somehow. So you connect them with the
somehow.
right people. You put them in the right place at the right time. And oh, look, now they know something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The I want to shift gears a little bit to if someone's been listening and they're wanting to explore this more, whether it's visual art or journaling,
right.
For maybe they might feel stuck in their faith, or maybe discouraged, or maybe deconstructing and wrestling with things. What would you recommend for someone in that situation, Mandy?
To write down their questions. Start with the questions, because that's where movement happens. That's where growth happens. Growth doesn't happen in knowing. Growth happens in not knowing. So don't be scared of the questions, and stare them down until they have something to say to you. So keep track of what it is that you're wanting to understand. Keep track of what it is that you're curious about or that's confusing to you, and write down what your thoughts are about it. Write down things that you're learning about it, and pay attention. If we just pay attention, it'll all unfold for us.
Yeah. That what you're curious about and what you're confused about. I love that. When I work with folks struggling with worry or anxiety, they get overwhelmed with the questions, and I encourage them as much as possible to answer their unanswered questions, and don't just leave it unanswered. But I think I missed the step before that of actually writing them down and actually facing them. And like, for a lot of folks that ruminate or get stuck, it's just in their head so much.
Yes.
And I tell them that, like, journaling helps get it out and
Absolutely.
makes it smaller. But I like the staring back at you part, because I think that's where they can see it more clearly, and it makes it smaller. It makes it not so overwhelming to do that. Have there been any journals or workshops that you've done on this practice, or is this something that you've developed on your own?
Like, how have I learned, like, journals or workshops that I've experienced, that I've been a student in?
Yeah.
There's not one specific guru that I sort of sat under for 5 years. So, I think for me, Savon, I just had to pay attention to what worked for me and what felt right. And take the bits and tiny bits and pieces from a dozen, 2 dozen teachers, and see if what they have to say works for me, or if there's a modified version that will work for me, and absorb it that way, and then put it in practice. And one thing I love about one mindset that I have with journaling is what might be working for me in one stretch of time, like a certain prompt or a certain art style, that may not be what I'm going to need in 6 months. And so as long as I'm putting things on a page in any way, shape, or form, I'm happy with it, because I'm tracking the steps of God in my life. And so however that happens, it doesn't matter. So I don't want people to feel like if they try one thing and it doesn't work, then that means that they're obviously not cut out for journaling. That may not be the case. They just might not be coming at it at the right angle.
It's a creative process.
Yes. And it's a fluid process. You got to stay real flexible.
Okay. Yeah. That's so important right now.
Mhm.
how everything's changing. I
Mhm.
I thought we were through this, and then the news of this last month.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
um it's the next thing.
Right.
But there's I'm I fight for hope,
Mhm.
and faith and joy, even
Mhm.
um uh yeah, even deeply feeling the 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 suffering and
Yeah.
the pain of people.
Mhm.
Yeah. So um uh thank you for sharing, Mandy. um the uh as we wind down our time today,
Mhm.
any last thoughts, or before last thoughts, what would what would you say is kind of significant about, like, the start of 2022 for you personally, and with your art, or with your journaling?
Um, I think one thing that I want to do this year is more deeply explore journaling as a spiritual practice and how I can help others put into words what I think about that, what my approach is in an open-handed way, but say, is it possible, if God is a God of epistles or letters and poems or psalms and history books
Mm.
or the Old Testament and wildly creative writers, which would be the prophets, I mean, if we can find God in their pages, then there may be hints and bits and pieces of God that we can see in ours as well. I'm not saying my journal should be canonized, but
Hmm.
but it might have some sacred knowing. It might be able to help me see in today what God is doing in my life.
Yeah.
So I want to find a way to convey that to other people.
Mm.
That's a part of this year. And I think another part of this year is hopefully recovering from the emotional and mental exhaustion of the past few years. On top of a global pandemic, my family has had multiple layers of heartbreak and difficulty in our micro world and in our family, in our immediate home. And so I'm worn down on more levels than is obvious. And so needing time to replenish, needing time to return to visual art as something that increases my mental health capacity, and really allowing for gentle recovery and not pushing myself, because I cannot move as quickly. It takes me 3 days to work through something that years ago would have taken me 3 hours. Like mentally, my processing is much, much slower now. And I think
Mm.
everybody's experiencing that on some level.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
You're having to be patient with yourself,
Very.
at,
And
being
and
slower.
compassionate and gentle. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Earlier you said, like, prompts or uh mediums, like, might change,
Mhm.
and I think what you just described, it's almost like journaling or art is a way of kind of capturing those moments, like
Yes.
those times in our lives,
Mhm.
um and if you collect them, then you can look back on,
Mhm.
like, what you've been through,
Mhm.
um
Absolutely.
and that's one of the things that I regret, at not um giving myself permission, or allowing myself to see myself as an artist, because I'm trying to be a communicator and encourage people, and I wish I
Mhm.
had captured more stories of when the kids were babies and toddlers,
Mm.
um
Yeah.
and um because my favorite authors are great storytellers. And I was like, oh man, I wish I had like let myself into their cool club earlier. and let myself be creative sooner.
Mhm.
But that's what I want to do now
Mm.
um is it release more creativity or art. And one of the ways is doing that is like hanging out with creative people, having creative
The
friends.
osmosis,
Yes, yes,
creativity by osmosis.
yes. So I'm thankful and grateful, Mandy, that we connected on social media. Like
Me too.
your your art, it blesses me, and also what you share
Mhm.
about your life, and um just even not just the pandemic, but like
Right,
you've shared some things about um uh, uh social justice things
right,
as
right.
that as a person of color, like really um um encouraged me and
Mm,
helped me. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Like
mm.
that was really helpful to me to know that yeah, that you're an ally, that you care
Absolutely.
about how we're doing as a country
Mhm,
with that.
mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Mandy.
Mhm.
um yeah. Oh, something new that I'm wanting to do on the podcast is ask folks like what's inspiring them, or like what they're learning, and what maybe
Yeah.
what books are encouraging them, or inspiring them. So is there anything lately that's inspiring you?
Oh, Savannah, I love to talk about books. Yes. Actually, this is not so much a creative or visual art inspiration, but
Mhm.
I'm into two books right now that are really speaking into the faith amidst difficulty. One is Kate Bowler just released a devotion called Good Enough, and it's 40 days of I don't have it with me, but it's a 40-ish day devotional, and it's just about how she's one of those Christian thought leaders who's going to tell the dang truth about life. She's going to talk about how hard it is and
Mm.
invite people into looking for the beauty amidst the pain. So her writing is honest and challenging and invitational, and I love it. And then the second one I'm reading, and these actually work really well together, is Tish Harrison Warren. She is writing. She just released a book called Prayer in the Night, and she basically has based the structure of the book on the Compline, or a section of the Compline, which is a nighttime prayer in liturgy, and it's the same kind of angle of a spirituality of suffering, and telling the truth about how hard life is, and telling the truth about pain and about faith amidst suffering. And it's very timely for me to be reading both of these, because in our tiny little family, there's some significant suffering right now, and then in the world at large, with everything that's happening with Ukraine, and all the questions that we have about when are we in the clear with this pandemic. There's just a lot of hard stuff, a lot of heavy stuff, and so reading the wisdom of both of these women, and their honesty and their boldness to just tell the truth about how hard life is, but still hold faith. I mean, wow, it's nurturing my soul right now.
Mm. Yeah. Well, great Lent season reads.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Telling the truth about suffering.
Mhm.
Again, I'm going back to like how I respond to your art.
Mm,
It's like messy, and there's like no words, and sometimes there's no words for the mess in life.
exactly.
So it
Hmm.
represents life.
Hmm.
I think that's
Hmm.
I take breaks on social media after I've listened to folks talk about their pain for hours. and it's just like a moment of stillness to like just sit and like the colors, the colors that you use, and sometimes it's not, I'm not there, so I can't see the 3 dimension of it, but it's like gloppy. So is that
yes? There's
an okay
a lot of
word?
texture.
Yeah,
Yes, gloppy's
texture.
great.
Right. And it's just like, I don't know. But I think that's what it is. Like it,
Yeah.
art allows you to be truthful without words, about life,
Exactly.
and it's not all like straight lines.
No.
And
Only robots can do that. The human hand cannot draw a straight line. So we don't even have to try. Just go ahead and be honest about that too.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I hope God is with you powerfully with what you guys are going through.
Thank you.
And thank you for being my friend, Mandy.
You too, Siobhan. Thank you so much.
And for folks that would like to connect with you or see more of your art, where can they do that?
My website is mandythompson.com, and my Instagram is also Mandy Thompson. My Facebook is Mandy Thompson Art. I mean, basically just Google Mandy Thompson. I'm going to come up. I'm one of about 3, so you'll find me easily. And I would love if your listeners have any more questions for me about journaling, about how, if they're practitioners, about how they can say things for beginners that's not in a way that's not intimidating, or what some early first steps are. I mean, I know, there's so many art journaling or art therapy resources out there that do also tap into journaling as a therapeutic resource. But if they want to talk to somebody who has years and years and years of practice and teaching, I'm not an art therapist, but I am a journal teacher, and I understand the intersection of mental health and physical resources, visual and verbal resources to get that out there. So if they want to reach out to me, absolutely, please do. I would love to talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Mandy.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this, Siobhan.